Hi, I'm Wendy, and today I'm painting autumn trees in watercolour in a fast and loose way. It will be a quick study, and I hope you can practice these techniques and put them to use in your autumn landscape paintings. I'll start off talking a little bit about colour mixing and then demonstrate the dry brush technique, which is very useful for painting foliage in a quick and loose way. And then finally we'll have a look at the rigger brush to make some expressive brush strokes for making the trunks and the twigs on the trees. I'm using my little pan here with some squeezed in tube colours. I'll only be using 3 colours for the little study today. One of them is burnt sienna that I'm mixing now. It's always a good idea, particularly if you're not that familiar with the watercolours, to do some colour swatches first. I'm trying here to get the colour as dark as it will go and then gradually adding some water to it to see the lightest tones that I can get with it. It may be useful, especially for beginners, to label these swatches so that you can go back to them in the future and get some understanding of the colours. The second colour I'm going to use is burnt umber. I'm painting a similar colour swatch and you can clearly see the difference. The burnt umber is a darker, browner colour than the reddish burnt sienna. Both of these colours I'll be mixing in varying amounts with ultramarine. I'll speed this next section up a little bit. You may want to use the burnt sienna on its own for part of the foliage, as it's a lovely autumn colour, but you will want to change it, and you can do this by adding varying amounts of the ultramarine. You will need to mix a stiff dark mix of burnt sienna or burnt umber with the ultramarine for dark foliage shadows and the branches and the twigs. Try to keep these mixes on the warm side, as too much ultramarine will produce a black, which I find to be quite unattractive in a painting. And now I've mixed up a stiff mix of the burnt sienna with just a touch of the ultramarine, and I'm doing downward strokes with about a number 6 brush. You could use a number 8, and it's this hitting and missing of the texture in the paper here that's giving this dry brush effect and suggesting the foliage on the autumn trees. And a darker mix of the same colours will suggest the shadow or some darker leaves on there. And here I'm just having another practice. It looks quite simple, but in actual fact it is quite tricky to do this. A little more water here with the mix, and the dry brush is not quite as apparent. This sort of stroke would do very well for trees in the distance. The rigger is a really useful brush. It can give you a fine line, like for the twigs and little trees that I'm doing here, but it holds an awful lot of paint, so you can do the whole little bush or tree in one go. I like to use the rigger using upward strokes, the way that the tree's growing, and again it's something that you need to practice. I always have a practice on doing these before I would put them into a picture, and I've been painting for a long time, so you do need to practice. I can't emphasize that enough. Now you'll see the painting of the study that I showed you. I used mainly burnt sienna and ultramarine for the foliage, and I used burnt umber and ultramarine for the twigs and branches. I put a little bit of foreground in there just to anchor the trees and to just make it look a little bit more painterly. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something from it. I'll put these techniques into practice in my next painting video of a simple autumn landscape. If you don't want to miss that and you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button. Bye bye for now.